Hello and welcome. I am so happy to have you with me today. It's not a regular show. Think of it as a conference for GAD, Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Now, because of COVID 19, we're not able to meet at various events that all of us would be a part of today. So I wanted to bring the event to y'all, to everybody. Now, for ones out there who may not know what Global Accessibility Awareness Day is, GAD, Global Accessibility Awareness Day is a special day where we bring awareness about digital access, about inclusion when it comes to assistive and adaptive technologies out there for over a billion people worldwide who have disabilities out there. So it's our day. You know, my disability, quadriplegic, C6, power wheelchair user, 27 years. What up? Ride or die, that's me. We got a great show and a great conference today. You might have seen the promo that we released yesterday with some of the amazing guests. We weren't able to put all the guests in there. I apologize. But I did tag everyone on Twitter who's going to be on this very special program. So without any further delay, let's bring on a very special guest to kick this off. And I'm so excited to have with me right now a great friend that I am honored to talk to on this Global Accessibility Awareness Day, former chairman of Worldwide Studios, the great Sean Layton. Sean, how are you, my friend?
Really good, Paul. How you doing?
Sean, I am doing fantastic. It's good to see you. Great to catch up with you, my friend. Hope you and your family are staying well during this pandemic.
Yes, thank you. My family are all fine. We're all in good health. Just like everybody in the world, I think we may be bouncing off the walls a little bit, but no, we're all good, and we look forward to seeing you again in person, Paul.
Me too, Sean. Me too, Sean. Looking forward to that. And Sean, I especially wanted to have you on this day
Hmm.
when we celebrate GAD and Global Accessibility Awareness Day,
Right.
because Sean, you have been so instrumental to accessibility, especially when it comes to the video game industry. And Sean, when you think of accessibility, what comes to your mind? What are some thoughts that evokes in your mind?
Well, the key, my key response or reaction to the term accessibility simply is, the goal that more people will get to enjoy the game. The game will appeal to more wider audiences, that folks who might have felt, unable to get the full measure of enjoyment out of the video games. As a video game developer, we're trying to find avenues and technologies and options that will allow everybody to get the full measure of enjoyment out of their video games. And for us, that just means more people get to play, more people get to see the ending of games, and hopefully become big fans of the video game industry and the community. And accessibility just reads as inclusiveness to me.
And Sean, when you were first approached about accessibility in your role and position of oversight, what were some of the things that you might have had in your mind? Did you have any questions about what accessibility was? Would it be viable out there? Would ones even want to have accessibility in gaming? When you were first approached, do you remember some of the things that you thought about?
When I was first approached, yeah, that would be, gosh, now over 10 years ago, I suppose. Um, no, maybe not quite that long, but at least 5 or 6 years ago. When we started talking about it, the first time I came across it, Paul, was people were discussing changing color settings to help colorblind gamers be able to see the two teams against each other. Red and green being sometimes the two color choices that the multiplayer designers would make, and then finding out that that was really going to be a problem for certain games. So allowing people to reassign color choices in that regard was the first time I came across the concept of accessibility. And then more questions came from that. Okay, well, that's great. That helps that community improve their game experience. But then there are other issues. I think probably a big watershed point was when Naughty Dog was working on Uncharted 4, and realizing that some of the button press combinations or some of the uh, physical interactions you'd have with the game were difficult for players of differing abilities. Josh Straub gave a lot of help to the Naughty Dog team. He's such an outspoken evangelist on this subject, and really helped them create. I think Uncharted 4 was probably the first game to have a full-blown menu and option settings to improve the accessibility of the game, to help people enjoy their experience in Uncharted, not be frustrated, not be cut out, but actually be able to go on and enjoy the full majesty of the game. And Naughty Dog was a leader then and continues to be in that regard. But I'm happy to say that all the development studios that I've worked with over time have all come to the accessibility issue, because once again, we don't want to create barriers that prevent people from enjoying our art. And that continues to be probably the driving impetus behind the continued expansion of accessibility options and systems.
I love it. I love it, Sean. And I remember when you and I first met at PSX.
Oh
I
yeah.
think it was 2017. And one thing that really impressed me about you, Sean, is when we had our accessibility meetup, and a mutual friend brought us over to meet. And what impressed me about you, Sean, was that when I was talking to you, you were really paying attention to what I was saying about the issues that I was having when it comes to gaming. And you were so impressed with that you wanted to make sure that you guys had a presence at one of our abilities expo, and we really appreciate you doing that. And here's something that kind of resonates with everyone out there, Sean. Whenever I bring up your name and accessibility, they always say Sean is a great listener. Sean listens to what you have to say. He is passionate about making sure that we have this accessibility in gaming. And then that was Friday night, and then Saturday night, I think I was interviewing Josh Robb. I was over there, and you showed up, and you had your team with you, and what impressed me, you said, "Hey, Paul," and I told my wife, I said, "Sean remembered my name, Ray." So I was like fanboying out, and then after that, you and I have been buds since. But that's one thing we really appreciate about that, what you do and remember us, Sean. And was there something that you may have heard or witnessed personally that really touched you as far as accessibility in gaming and finding out some of the barriers that you guys were able to overcome so that we can game and just enjoy it?
Well, there is no learning without listening, and that's why it's so important. We're looking at a topic such as accessibility, which um, I can only really learn about it by listening to other people's experiences. Um, I've had the good fortune of being um, able to enjoy the game experience. Granted, I'm not the best gamer in the world, but that's on me. But there's no reason why the game should create barriers or prevent people from enjoying it entirely. So listening is very important for me to understand the issues surrounding that and what really is important to people and how they come at the game experience. One thing that did stick out with me was talking to a sales associate that was working with uh, at a retail level, one of the many PlayStation sales associates, and they were at an event with PlayStation VR, and people were waiting in line for the VR event, and a man had had come up there with his parents, and he had had some traumatic experience, so he was paralyzed from the shoulders down, and they put the VR headset on this gentleman, and we had that a game where you head a soccer ball into a net by moving your head back and forth with the PSVR headset. And after that experience, it was so touching to hear the game associate tell me that story, because the gentleman said, this is the first time he's been able to play a video game since his accident. And he was so touched by that experience. So was she. I heard the story. I felt very emotional about that, to think that this is amazing. Our gaming technology, in this case, PlayStation VR, can actually help people come back to gaming or enjoy gaming who they might have thought that was completely out of their realm of opportunity following traumatic accidents or being born differently able. So whether it's the PlayStation 4, the controller, the gaming, the system, or something like VR, I think everything we do in gaming needs to be greater outreach, talk to more people, touch more people, allow more people to enjoy the amazing world of video gaming. And I thought in that moment, wow, PSVR could really be a game changer for a lot of
You know what, Sean? The social aspect of gaming, it's, it can't be preached enough. And when you and I were growing up, maybe our parents were like, hey, you playing all these video games, do something productive. But now we see video games are so instrumental that help us with our reaction, that gets these motory senses coming and going. And I remember when I was playing with, I think it was The Last Guardian. I think it was the VR. And
people.
when I put that VR on, Sean, and when the dragon was flying, man, I had a butterfly in my stomach, man. And I haven't had butterfly in my stomach, man, for about over 25 years over that time. So those experiences right there really have to just warm your heart and just say, I am so glad we did this and we did the right thing. And when you reflect on times like that, Sean, how does that kind of give you motivation, maybe just to draw strength from others who have challenges? And have you taken away anything from our community that has helped you personally?
Oh, of course. I mean, just the sheer passion and optimism of that community. They're speaking to yourself, Paul, or people like Josh or others who are leaders in this movement. Um, Everyone comes at it with, we just want to make it better. We're not here to shout or point fingers or say, why didn't you do it that way for us? They said, we want to help you make it better. And I think developer and development teams are men and women of good faith and good community, and they want to hear how they can help make their games speak and reach more people across the board. So please keep that positive energy, that optimism, that passion, that drive. Um, that the gaming community that you represent and that we're talking to and we're trying to get even deeper into our gaming experiences have been definitely a force for good in game development.
Now we appreciate that, Sean, because we're trying to fight that hard fight, and it's good to have ones like yourself behind us. And it seemed like to me, Sean, that when you came on board with this accessibility movement, to me it looked like the other studios, game developers were like, hey, if Sean and them are doing it, we should do it too. So talk about maybe just how it felt to have others look at what you were doing and say, hey, we gotta we gotta up the bar and we gotta do it too.
Well, as I've often described, serving as the chairman of the studios, the main aspect of my job is not game design, game development, or uh, game implementation. My job is to clear the boulders from the road so the development teams can move quickly and smoothly to the goal that they're chasing and try to reduce impediments and give support. So, on the whole accessibility issue, I think it was really a grassroots movement. Um, Folks like yourself and others coming at it from that side of it. But on the other end of the grassroots were the development teams themselves. I referenced Naughty Dog earlier. All development teams were doing work looking into this issue about accessibility, and it was very much a bubble up, bubbled up from the studios into management, and then management looking at it and saying, that's super smart, and how do we support that, and how do we encourage other studio teams? There's a lot of learning going on inside of the studios that I was in charge of the teams sharing with one another what advances they've made in the area of accessibility. It's very much kind of put together that playbook piece by piece from different studios and different experiences, sharing technology and hints and tips on how they can make that better. So I was just glad that I was able to associate myself with some teams that were very forward thinking, very much wanting to widen the community of gamers who enjoy their games and trying to make it accessible to everyone. So my hat's off to the teams. I was just lucky enough to be there at that time.
Sean, That is amazing. Given teams that you work with props when it comes to this movement, then that really shows your humility and just how awesome you are in this movement. And Sean, since this is GAD, I wanted to ask you, what are some of your most memorable GAD moments? Because you guys have done a lot of things when you were a chairman to really just pump this up and make it known out there to the masses. What have been some of your memories?
I guess I guess what stands out, next to probably the most impressive memory I had, Paul, was when you made the trip up to our campus in San Mateo to speak to the population and tell them your story and about how important accessibility is. I was very much impressed by your your speech, your delivery, your confidence, your optimism, and on top of that, the turnout was amazing. We got so many people to come to hear you speak. I was very glad for that, to see that not just the development teams, but all throughout the publishing, sales, marketing departments, this is something that everyone's got a keen eye on, and they're all trying to learn. And so when you came to campus to talk to us, that was incredibly impressive, and I'll never forget that. At the same time, there was that it wasn't on GAD, but it was, I think, connected with E3, where we had that cocktail reception for different members of the accessibility
Oh
movement.
yes, yes, I remember that. Yes, yes.
Yeah, and I was just so touched to see how many people turned out. And the more people I could listen to, the more things I could learn about. It's not just about color blindness, and it's not just about working with controllers. There's sound questions around it. There's other visual questions around it that we need to be aware of. And because it's still in many ways a nascent movement, and there's no single source of truth, or all the truth anyway, it's really important for us to have those opportunities to bring people together from different aspects of this challenge, so we can learn even more and better about how we make progress here. So that was a great party, and it was great having you on campus.
My It was my honor, my friend. I've it's we had so much fun, and
Yeah, it was a good day.
it bring back great memories and everything. On Twitter, you
Yeah.
and I have some pictures together. And Sean, before I let you go, my friend, is there
Mhm.
anything else you like to articulate to your fans, to the movement? Because you're well loved in this industry, Sean. Even though we haven't heard from you outside of Twitter for a while, ones would like to hear anything you would have to say just about accessibility and closing, or just whatever you want to say, my friend.
Well, thank you, Paul. Again, I appreciate being invited on your show to talk about this, which is near and dear to my heart, because I think it's important. I think we've made good progress. I think with all challenges in the world, you can come up with a million reasons why it's hard or difficult or expensive, and why one can't do a thing. But you only ever need one reason to do it. And I think we've all come up with the right reason around accessibility. Accessibility equals inclusiveness. Exactly that. And it brings more people into the world of gaming, which is a good thing. And any creator, whether you're a musician or a movie director or a game developer, you want more people to have more enjoyment with your passion project, the art you create. No one wants to limit the range or scope of folks uh, who can enjoy that. They want it to be as wide as possible. I think that's the beauty of accessibility, and why it's so very much important. As for where do we go from here, I think again, it's still reasonably early days in that movement, and I think we'll see more progress continue along that spline into the next generation of gaming and beyond. But for right now, I think I speak to everybody listening that right now, just take care and be well and stay safe. And I look forward to being able to speak to you guys again in the future.
Well said, my friend Sean. Great to chat with you. And when that Mount Rushmore of gaming is completed, we know where your picture is going to be on there, because without you and without you have done, we would have missed out on a lot of great gaming experiences, not only from the disabled community, but gamers just in general. We really appreciate you, man, and we
Thank you.
love you to death, brother. And we look forward to catching up with you soon.
You're very kind, Brother Paul. Take care.
That was former chairman of Sony Interactive Worldwide Studios, the great Sean Layden. Sean has been responsible for a lot of great things going on in the gaming industry, especially when it comes to assistive and adaptive technologies. The way he embraced gaming for all is something that we will never, ever, ever forget. All right, let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. Let's talk about if you have hearing loss. What are some technologies out there that can help you? What does Global Accessibility Awareness Day mean for a great organization out there and an advocate when it comes to this cause? Check it out, y'all. I am so happy right now to have some amazing guests join me on this special GAD 2020 program. I have KR Liu. She is the head of brand accessibility over at Google and an amazing advocate. KR, how are you, my dear?
I'm doing great, Paul. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you, KR, and it's truly, truly an honor. And I'm also joined by my great friend, Steve Yule, Consumer Technology Association Foundation, Executive Director, the highest degree of declaration, the Executive Director. Steve, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing great, Paul, and I'm glad to be here. And although I will say there is one step higher, and that is my board of trustees, which I am glad to have KR as a part of. So we are both happy to join you here today for a great conversation about GAD.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys so much. And KR, I wanted to start with you. What does GAD mean to you personally? We know we've made some strides since 2009 when we had the first GAD, and now we're doing this annually. But there are some great things that have happened over the years. And what does GAD mean for you personally, not only in your personal life, but also in your professional life as well?
For me, GAD is incredibly important. It's a day where for people with disabilities to be seen, to be heard, to be represented about all the amazing, incredible things that we bring to society and to technological innovation. And my role at Google is really to help amplify that and to bring the lens of disability to the table and make sure that people with disabilities are represented. And I help elevate the voices of disabled people. And that's what this day is about, is really elevating those voices and celebrating disabled people.
And KR, we really appreciate what you guys are doing over at Google, doing some amazing things. I know a person like myself who lives with a disability really are just awestruck on some of the great things that you guys are able to accomplish. And Sir Stephen, let me throw it to you, my friend. So GAD 2020, what does it personally mean for you on this day? And what are some things you would really like to see just going forward, even after this day?
Yeah, it's so important to have a day where we can really, celebrate all the great work that is being done around accessibility across the industry, from the large global brands like Google to the small startups and everyone else that is being developed here. It's great to see everything that has occurred over the last 9 years with GAD, but there is still a lot more that can be done around the accessibility, and that's why I'm so pleased to see we're going to be seeing a lot of CTA member companies announcing different things around GAD, talking about different types of technologies, and we're continuing to see more and more innovation and more focus going forward in this space.
Awesome. I really appreciate that, Stephen. KR, when we look at where we're at today in the stream of time and thinking back when you and I were younger, the disability world, the technology wasn't really out there. And to see where it's at today, what do you think has been the biggest barrier to kind of be at the moment where we're at today, to have all this amazing innovation, all this amazing assistive and adaptive technologies that's really enhancing the lives for the community?
Yeah, for me, I have severe hearing loss, and I grew up, wearing hearing aids, and there was no such thing as assistive technology in the classroom. And what I'm grateful to see today is the innovation of technology for people with hearing loss, or everything from, video conferencing having embedded captions in real time, which is something I use every day on a regular basis just to have meetings with different colleagues, but also for students who are now doing distance learning from home and making sure that they have access to education. But also looking at other innovations in hearing loss has been really exciting to me. I originally came to Google because they reached out to me to think about how could we evolve our technology in captioning, and I wanted to see that not only be useful to me from having a mobile device with audio content or video content, or maybe I'm watching your show, Paul, and I want to be able to follow along. Now I have real-time captioning on my device so that I can keep up to date with the conversation. And that's what the beautiful thing is, bringing people with disabilities to the table to help in our product innovation and make sure that we're building with them forward and continuing to see that evolve more and more and more. Because to me, people with disabilities are some of the most incredible dreamers and doers. And when we come together, we build some incredible things. And that's what I'm really excited about, is to continue to see that amplification of that innovation and the power that we bring to the table. And I really see a world where that will continue to grow even more so, especially now.
I totally agree, KR. And when we look at just your life and the journey to be where you're at today, to really be in a position to invoke change and to make decisions that can help us out, you gotta look back on your journey and say, wow, Google approached you and they're like, hey, why don't you do this? Come on board, let's do this together. What were some of the thoughts that went through your mind? Did you ever have a moment where you're like, wow, all the sacrifices, all the blood, sweat, and tears, this journey was well worth it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, early on, I was younger, having hearing loss and having a disability and not seeing a lot of people like me was incredibly frustrating. But throughout the years, it's become something that gives me such a unique perspective, and allows me to bring knowledge and experience that some people may not understand, but it also helps better the world. It changes the world. It helps us see disability with a different lens and perspective to show the diverse representation that we are. And I'm super proud to be able to be in a position where I can help amplify that and do the storytelling of the people with disabilities and who we are as people, and how we live our life every day. And I'm actually so grateful to be in the position I am to help that. And so this journey has been absolutely well worth it, even though it's been hard and there were times where I wanted to give up and I just didn't think anybody cared what I had to say or what I thought. And now I don't feel that at all. If anything, I feel people really want to learn and better understand. And it's my responsibility to be there to help educate and to help people learn about how we can make the world more accessible, how we can make information accessible to everyone. And that's a great part of my job. And it's something that I will do for the rest of my life because it's going to be necessary. It's never going to stop. The innovation never stops. The conversation never stops. And so for me, it's been well worth it.
And KR, I know exactly, how you feel when I was hearing you talk about, your journey and wondering if people really want to hear what you have to say. It just took me back to a moment where, I would have times like that too in my mind wondering, do they really care? Do they really want to hear? And we are so happy to say nowadays, yes. And companies like Google and you want to hear, and we are so happy, to have you in that position to evoke that change, and where you're one of the champions out there. And then please continue to fight that fine fight. We really appreciate it. And Steve, KR brought up a very good point about people wanting to hear what you had to say, the vision, and so forth. And as an able-bodied person, Steve, and working closely with the disabled community, the aging in adult community, over at the CTA Foundation. What have you learned along the way as far as some of the challenges that we face? Not only the challenges, but how did you become more educated in this field to be in a position now where you can help us out and evoke some change?
Yeah, I think the most important thing I learned is to listen. I mean, as you point out, being a able-bodied person, whether temporarily or whatever, the worst thing that can happen is for me to come to any table and say, okay, I've got the solution. I know the solution for all disability out there. And it's not the case. If you're not engaging people with disabilities, if you're not engaging people, across the diversity spectrum of various ages, abilities, sexes, races, kind of across the entire ability spectrum, across the entire diversity spectrum, that's really having all those voices together is how we're going to get to the best solutions that are out there for people. So, I ask lots of dumb questions out there. I ask, trying to figure out what works well for people and trying to identify, what are those solutions that we can really highlight as an industry. I do think that we've seen a great deal of change. I mean, we're celebrating, 9 years of GAD. It actually happens that the CTA Foundation was stood up about 8 years ago. And when we created the foundation, the initial board of trustees said they wanted to focus specifically on both aging and disability issues. And I think that was a recognition of the importance of these issues. And we've been seeing more and more companies paying great attention to these issues, whether it is the big global brands, what KR is doing at Google, what Microsoft and IBM and all these other companies are doing, but also the innovation that we're able to see. I'll actually say, when I first met KR, it was at CES where she was with a startup company, and I just remember her. We met in the middle of one of those hallways where there's tons of people walking by, and she was showing a hearable product, and all of a sudden it sounded like we were talking in a private conference room, and I was just so amazed. And to see the innovation and all the work that's going on to that, and then see that team that she was working for and how they've spread out across the industry and continue to come up with so many great innovations. We really need to help encourage and bring more people into the accessibility space. I think that's where there's so much opportunity with something like the Global Accessibility Awareness Day, for us to get more people at the table. And whether it's talking about digital accessibility or hardware accessibility, there's a lot that we can do here in the tech community.
And Steve, I tell you, you ever heard of the saying, the 6 degrees of separation? I think I'm going to coin a new one, the 6 degrees of Stephen Ewell, because Steve, everybody's connected to you when it comes to this movement that we have. I mean, we all know each other because of you, and we appreciate everything that you have done, Steve. And KR, Steve brought up a very good point, and that point was keeping the conversation going. KR, what has been the most challenging part of our movement to really keep the dialogue going, keep the conversation going? Because it seems we have this great event. We get a lot of awareness out there, but then it seems maybe to some that it has died down, or maybe it hasn't. But what ways can we do to keep this going, not just on GAD, but every single day?
Yeah, I mean, Paul, this is a perfect example of how we keep that conversation going. It shows like yours that allow you to have a voice and talk about the things you're passionate about. So I think the opportunity we have is to show how we keep that conversation going, how we do these amazing storytelling pieces, not just on days that are important like GAD, but other moments that are culturally relevant to people with disabilities and how we show up there. But I think it's important that we figure out How we also engage our allies. I will say Steve has been an incredible ally of mine, and he has opened so many doors for me over the years. And without those allies, we don't have opportunities sometimes. So it's us coming together, working together, creating a conversation. How can we come together and elevate the voices of people with disabilities and insert them in important movements and conversations? And there's so many conversations happening right now. So how do we figure out how to bring everyone together? I think that's the opportunity we have, is to build a platform where the community can all come together, all be heard and seen. And I think that's the opportunity going forward, is figuring out how we do that.
And KR, one thing I really love about our community, the disabled community, there's no segregation. We don't say, well, you have a hearing impairment, so you go on that side. You have a vision impairment, you go on that side. You have a mobility impairment, you go on that side. What I love is that we all come together. We all see the greater good. If something doesn't help me out being a quad, but something helps you out, KR, when it comes to hearing, I'm gonna say, hey, KR, check this out. There's no segregation in our community, and that's really encouraging. That's what I love just about all the things that we do, and we appreciate what you do, remembering all of us, KR, no matter what our disability may be.
Yeah, absolutely, because I think it's important to show the intersectionality of disability, right? We come from different backgrounds, race, gender, sexual orientation, age. I mean, we are so unique and diverse, and that's important to remember too. And we're also learning from each other, right? I learn from my community every single day, and that's important that we continue to learn. And like Steve said, continue to listen to each other, listen to what's important, what matters right now. How can we be helpful not only to each other, but even the positions we're in to create change?
And that is so true. And Steve, having the Consumer Technology Association foundation behind our movement, it really, really means a lot. And great folks like with KR and with folks doing at Google, Microsoft, all these other corporations, we are humbled, Steve, that you guys want to definitely help us out with that. And going forward, Steve, when it comes to life after GAD, what are some things that we as the community can do just to help out and to further the cause?
There's a number of different things. One is to certainly look at some of the organizations that are working on accessibility, whether it's an organization like Teach Access, and I know you've talked to some of the people that are involved with that, but they're helping students learn about accessibility so that when they join the workforce, the future engineers in our industry can have some experience with accessibility. Whether you're talking with the various advocacy organizations that represent the Hearing Loss Association of America, United Spinal, I know is very important to you, Paul, the various blindness organizations, other groups along those lines, get involved with them. They're all doing work with the tech community, as well as, work with, for people who are in the workforce, work with your companies, see, what innovations are out there, where there's opportunities. I also see a great deal of opportunity now that, so many of us have been self-isolated at home for what feels like way too long right now. But I think we're going to see some really interesting innovations come out in the next few months to the next few years as people recognize some of the challenges that they've faced and are creating some of the solutions. So I really look forward to, we do our startup contest every year for CES for, technology that can help older adults or people with disabilities. I'm really looking forward to some great innovations that we can highlight here soon coming, from, people with disabilities.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Steve, I know we talked about it on another show. One of the winners of that award was doing some contact tracing and things to fight this pandemic. So it's really, really amazing what's happening when it comes to innovation. And KR, what type of advice would you give some of us who are living with a disability to, number one, never give up on your dreams? Number two, when you are having that down moment in your life, not to give up, but to keep on striving. What kind of advice can you give to us?
I would say the best advice I could give is to always look back and see how far you've come. Think about the things that you have overcome, but you have to know that you may hear no many, many times, whether you have an idea or a vision or something you want to pursue personally, professionally. You have to keep pushing forward. You have to keep speaking up. Eventually, someone will hear you. Someone will open that door, and the right time will come for that opportunity to happen. I'm a big believer in things happen when they're supposed to, and that timing is everything. So don't give up. If you have a dream and you want to pursue that and you're passionate about it, keep going for it, and the right moment will come. And through that, you'll learn, you'll have ups and downs, but it will make you stronger. It will make you think differently. You may have new skills that you never thought you had. You'll grow as a person. I mean, that's how we grow, right? When we fall and we get back up, we come back with a completely different perspective sometimes. So for me, it's like just keep pushing forward, keep speaking up, be as loud as possible, right? And eventually you will be heard, and that opportunity and those doors will open.
KR, thank you so much for.
Thank you, Paul.
And
thank you for your show. I have to say I'm a big fan, and I always enjoy it. So it's important that we have platforms like this. So thank you for having me and having us.
You're making me blush, KR. You have no idea. To hear that from you it's really amazing. And Steve as well too. And I know today, Gad, Google has released some amazing things. How can people find out some of the great things that Google talked about on today? Gad, is there a particular website you want to send them to, your social media? How can they find out some of the great things that you guys are doing on Gad?
Yeah, we'll be doing some great things. Just stay tuned. We have some great announcements we'll be making on Gad. So lots of great things coming. So just stay tuned. And it'll be a pretty exciting day.
Looking forward to it. And Steve, before I let you go, Steve, any closing points or sentiments on this Gad that you would like to have us hear, or even, let's say, people are in a position of authority who are thinking about assistive and adaptive technologies and not quite sure if this is something they need to try to look into. Any advice you'd like to give to those companies out there?
Well, if anyone's looking into assistive technology and not quite sure about it, I would say go for it. There's lots of opportunity in this space. I just really like to echo what KR said. Paul, really, it's so important to have people in the media covering these issues. And I know your show is a general technology show. You're talking about all kinds of really cool tech, and that's what I love about it. But having that accessibility component and bringing that into the mainstream discussion is so important. So thank you for all you're doing. Definitely keep an eye, I'd say, for all your attendees, keep an eye on social media throughout Global Accessibility Awareness Day. We're going to be helping to share many of the things that people in our industry are doing around accessible technology. But let's just keep this conversation going, because there's plenty more for us to do, plenty more opportunities for innovation, and I'm excited to see everything that's going to come out of this.
Well, Steve, always a pleasure talking to you, my friend. Even though we don't hang out at events like we used to in the past, but we're able to do it virtually and have a chat while we're staying safe during this trying time. Thank you so much, Steve, for doing what you do, and looking forward to catching up with you, talking with you soon.
Absolutely. Well, I can't wait to see you, see KR. Hopefully we'll all be together in Las Vegas and at CES in January. But whenever we can next be together, safe and healthy, I'm really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And KR, in closing, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. You have no idea, to have you on this show to talk about your experience and some of the great things that are happening at Google. It's truly an honor and a privilege to talk to someone like yourself. And you take care of yourself. And please don't be a stranger. Come on back again.
Thank you so much, Paul, and I've enjoyed this, and I really appreciate you having me, and this has been a ton of fun, and I'm a big fan, like I said, so keep doing what you're doing, because like Steve said, having platforms like this is really important when we talk about accessibility, when we talk about innovation, and you're a great representative of that, so thank you.
Thank you. You guys gonna make me cry. Don't make me cry. I don't want to have like a crying Jordan meme with me crying. So you guys stop. Don't make me cry. But thank you guys so much.
All right, thank you.
Huge shout out to KR Liu, who is the brand accessibility. Huge shout out to KR Liu. She is so amazing. She's the head of brand accessibility over at Google. I actually worked on a project with her. If you saw what Google and Android did with me in a project a few months ago, it was released today on GAD, so it's a very special GAD for me. And the folks over at Android and Google, thank you so much for letting me be a part of it. And Steve Yule, CTA Foundation Executive Director, thank you so much for all you do. And I mean it. Steve is like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Everybody knows Steve in this assistive and adaptive.
Hi, my name is Tyler Shrink, and I am involved with the TSF Tyler Shrink Foundation. Thank you very much for having me, Paul. I'm always excited to talk about accessibility. I'm involved with a nonprofit foundation called the TSF, and what we do is we educate, provide, set up, and train individuals on how technology can provide them greater independence. So it's right in line with Global Accessibility Day. And it really ties in well with my personal story as well. I had a spinal cord injury that left me paralyzed from the neck down in 2012. And for years after my injury, all I would do is sit around and watch TV. You know, day in, day out, my life was eat, TV, sleep, repeat over and over again. And what started to change that was technology. And it was something as simple as a Microsoft Surface tablet that my friend donated that allowed me to control the computer by voice. And so I started off just by looking at baseball blogs, but it led to many other things. You know, now with accessibility, we can do almost anything from lights to televisions to doors to locks. All of these smart home things that are meant for convenience for the general public. It can be independence for folks like me. And that's where I would really stick with any advice would be a lot of these assistive technologies are off the shelf now, which makes them very affordable. Smart lights, you know, Amazon Fire TV to control your television, Google Home to do Chromecast or Google Home to do your lights. So, you know, fantastic day, and thank you for having me, Paul.
We'll talk about some more gaming inclusion. We're about to talk to an accessibility gaming developer god right now. And I'm so happy to have me right now. A great friend of mine, great person in the video game development world. I'm telling you, yes, especially when it comes to accessibility on this GAD 2020, the great Sam Thompson, senior producer, Sony Interactive Worldwide Studios. Sam, how are you, brother?
Paul, I'm doing well. That's an incredible introduction, one that I'll never be able to live up to. But thank you very much.
Now, for the people who know you, you definitely live up to it, Sam. Now, before we start our conversation, I want to wish you and your family safety during this time of this pandemic.
Thank you, sir. Likewise to you as well. I hope you and your family are doing well.
Appreciate it, my friend. You know, this kind of reminds me on this GAD 2020 of us being together a few years ago and having a wonderful GAD event. Mm-hmm. We talked about a lot of great things, and now because of this pandemic, we can't meet like we used to meet. So we have to have these virtual kind of events. So I'm so happy that you decided to be a part of this with us, Sam. Now, before we talk about accessibility and everything, what is your role at Sony Interactive Entertainment?
So I am the manager, senior producer with Worldwide Studios at Sony Interactive Entertainment, and I am the day-to-day producer working with Naughty Dog on the SAE side. So every project that Naughty Dog is working on, we are a part of.
Nice, nice. And Sam, you know what? One of these days, I gotta have you on just talk about your story to how you got into gaming, because that's amazing. But we'll save that for another show, because it's really incredible. And
Too kind, my friend. Too kind.
yes,
Too kind.
and Sam, when it comes to the first time you were approached about accessibility in gaming, what were some of the things that went through your mind? Because you're already in the industry for many years.
That's true. It was really, really interesting, actually. I think, I think back to the 5 stages of grief, because I went through all of them rather quickly. We were working on Uncharted Collection at the time, and that's when Joshua Straub had reached out to Naughty Dog and Alex and Amelia and asked them about, there was a particular part of the game that required a QuickTime event that he couldn't get through for rapid button pressing. And I'd been, one of the things that we do a lot in our development process is the UX and bringing in consumers to play our products, and then taking that information, analyzing it, sharing it with the team. And through all of the years that we've been doing this, I really hadn't strongly considered accessibility up until that point. So it was a pretty profound moment where, for the better part of a decade and a half, we had been doing these tests, and we had failed to consider some of the gameplay mechanics that we were leveraging so heavily were actually barriers to some players. And once you kind of looked at that and understood what that was, you really saw the whole gaming industry differently, and you really start to internalize what it means to make game accessible and make experiences that everybody can play and interact with. And then you start thinking about things, the caveats of the things that people normally raise as barriers, right? Like, it's going to water down the design or make gameplay too easy, or we don't have the resources or schedule, or it's going to take development in a different direction, right? All of those things are, they do come to mind. I mean, the first time you start to look into accessibility, you really panic about what it's going to do to the product schedule and how it's going to change the way people perceive this work of art. But that's really not the way. And, I've been blessed to work with teams on the first party side, predominantly Naughty Dog, but, there are other groups that we have in the first party family that are also very, very dedicated to accessibility. And one thing that I've learned over the years working with these wonderful folks is that, once the team starts to really understand accessibility and what it means to look at this as a core gameplay pillar, as a core development philosophy, you start integrating it earlier and earlier in the development process, and then all of a sudden it becomes a part of the fabric of what the team does. And it's no longer, accessibility isn't part of a conversation anymore. It's a given, it's a known, right? We're making accessible experiences now. And what we're doing is talking about how to make them even more accessible. So it's pretty profound and impactful, but it takes a few years, right? It's not something that immediately you just kind of, the light switch goes on, and then you have to really work to understand the scope and breadth of what you're trying to achieve.
And Sam, this may cause some developers or some studios out there to kind of push back a little bit because of the extra work that's involved. So what would you tell them? Why is it so important to embrace this accessibility in gaming and go that extra mile like you guys have done with Naughty Dog, Santa Monica Studios, to some of the great strides that you guys have achieved?
There's Josh Straub had imparted some wisdom a few years ago to me that still holds true today. And he had told me, we will never be more capable as gamers than we are at this moment right now. And not only does mindful development make games more accessible now for everyone, but it also future-proofs those experiences for future versions of ourselves. And when he had said that, I thought it was pretty profound, and I tucked it away in my mind, but I didn't really kind of internalize what he meant. But when you look at how we interact with the products we make and the games we play, I'm finding myself sitting farther and farther away from the TV. Living room, has changed. Maybe TV's change. I may need captions. Some days I do play with subtitles because it's hard to see the UI in certain products that I like to play. Multiplayer has its own host of challenges and interesting barriers that sometimes may not be a barrier for me. Like, sometimes I need to play with the audio down and I need other ways to hear what's going on around me. At any rate, I think it's really important that we embrace and support accessibility. And the only way to really make sure that we as a generation are going to be able to enjoy these experiences for years to come is to make gameplay experiences that incorporate this aspect of development, right? That we need to consider that there are many different ways that people approach interacting with our products, and we need to make them as accessible as they can be.
And well said, Sam. Well said. And when we look at what you guys were able to accomplish with Uncharted 4, that was transformational. I mean, it really just flipped the script when it came to gaming development and accessibility. What have you witnessed or maybe heard of that showed that we may need to push the envelope even further with accessibility feature? Did you witness anyone trying to play maybe Uncharted and you're like, hey, we need to do this, we need to do that, or we need to shift our focus to that? Did you ever witness anything like that? And if so, how did that kind of shift your focus?
Well, I think, I've been pretty blessed to work with tremendous teams that are very mindful of accessibility and really care about how consumers interact with their products. I think watching players kind of use the tools that we provide and also different, what's interesting, I guess, let me back up. Going back to UX testing and all of our accessibility work, we get to see a lot of players come in with a lot of varying skill sets. And oftentimes we're aggressively looking for players that fit a lot of different mediums. So we get the most, the richest data we can when we're testing our products. Sometimes we bring in folks for accessibility testing that have specific disabilities that we're looking for. And I remember back on Uncharted 4, specifically for multiplayer and the single player campaign, we were looking into our custom controller configurations for one-handed control and trying to better understand how players would utilize them, or if we were even close to making something that was functional. And we had this young man that had come in, and he had just lost his hand in a motorcycle accident about a year prior. And he had adapted controlling the camera with his chin. And it's a pretty usable adjustment. A lot of people that are in that position tend to migrate to that control config. And we had asked him, hey, would you mind just trying this one-handed control configuration for us and just see if you liked it and if it was useful? And he was very resistant to it. He didn't want to have anything to give him a leg up or to change the way he played the game with everybody else. He wanted it to be, I don't care about those things. I'm going to find a way to play the game so I am just like everybody else, and I'm going to kick their ass doing it, pardon my French. And I love that. I love that about, the way he approached the game. But eventually we did get him to try that one-handed configuration. And I remember his reaction was just this profound, like, holy cow, I don't have to worry so much now about controlling it with my chin. This thing is working, it's intuitive, and now I can work on other aspects of my multiplayer. I can work on enjoying other aspects of the game because I'm not so concerned with how do I manipulate the right analog stick with my chin. And I think, when you see those types of things and you get to witness people enjoying the products that you're making and understanding that these things are there, not to be used as a crutch, but to provide different ways for people to interact with the product. It's really rewarding. We were at the Abilities Expo a few years ago in LA, and we had some demos set up there at the PlayStation booth where we had consumers come in and they got their chance to play Insomniac and Marvel's Spider-Man using some of the accessibility features that Insomniac and Marvel had implemented into the product. And there were a lot of people that came up that had recently had an accident or become disabled, and they thought that they would never be able to game again. And playing these games and realizing that there were features and functionalities there specifically for their types of disability in mind, allowing them to be able to interact with the products. Just looking at their reaction to those things was kind of priceless, and it still sticks with me today.
Yeah, I remember that too, Sam. And we had the young kids playing, and just the joy in their heart. It really just warmed our warmed our heart and mind. We were so thankful to have you guys there. And when it comes to these accessibility features, is it just for ones who are or who has physical disabilities, or can others use them?
Oh, it's funny. Everybody can use accessibility features. It's there are obviously temporary disabilities, situational disabilities, right? It's not just about being disabled by an accident or having a medical condition, but you could be in a bedroom with your loved one late at night, and you're trying to play a game, and they're trying to sleep. You could have you could break your arm or sprain your wrist, right? All these things change the way you interact with the product. And it's not just about that. It's literally, I think sometimes people want the freedom to be able to interact with the product the way that they feel like they want to do it. I totally get that a lot of design teams, a lot of development teams want to they have a certain vision for how people play their games. But when you look at the way people are interacting with those products, they're doing it in a lot of different ways and doing it well. So I think it's up to us. It's our job as publishers and as development teams to craft experiences that everyone can interact with, that can be played in a number of different ways, that are not heavy-handed and don't require forcing players to only have one way to do something. It's just good design, right? Like you want to be able to, the product needs to anticipate how people interact with it and provide multiple paths for completion. I mean, that's intuitive design 101.
That's so true. And Sam, I want a game with my 85-year-old pops, and I know his reaction time is not as strong as it used to because he had a stroke a few years ago. So if I can put these accessibility features in a game with him, man, that would be crazy. I'm gonna put that on YouTube so we can all see that. Sam, that's gonna
I see that.
That's gonna be awesome. And Sam, are there any memories that you often look back on that really kind of reinforce the idea why accessibility in gaming matters and why it's so important?
That's a pretty deep question, Paul. I think every day we work with gamers of all ages, ethnicity, gender, skill levels, and they help us better understand how players interact and engage with our products. It's interesting, the more that we learn about our consumers and the people that play our products, we find that the core pillar of our development philosophy, as far and as long as I can remember, at least within the last decade, has always been looking at our UX testing models, look at our developmental DNA, and try to be more mindful of how people interact with our products. And for me, when I think back to all the games that we've worked on in the past and reflect on all the things that we've accomplished, I like to look at how we could have done things differently and how we could possibly make changes and be mindful of how to approach these challenges in the future. It's interesting when you work in this industry for as long as I have, games have come a long way. If you look back at the original Crash, man, that gameplay is brutal, and playing the Crash Insanity Collection when Activision released it was a great blast in the past for me, but it reminded me of how hard video games used to be, and the ones that we were working on. Jack and Daxter and the Burning Bush challenges is another great example of, we're asking a lot of our players to be so good at those games. I think that there's obviously an opportunity to continue on in that approach, but also be mindful that, just like shoe size is different for everybody, skill levels are varied, and they differ in the amount of time people have, the amount of mastery that they want to experience. All of those things vary. And for us to craft and experience an artistic vision, we need to make them as accessible, for lack of a better word, as possible, right? So more people can enjoy them the way that they want to enjoy them and experience them. So to me, I think it's looking back and being mindful of the direction and the path we've taken to get here, but taking that information and understanding that the path forward is going to provide a lot of opportunities for us to create more accessible experiences and further explore just the full range of accessibility for all the products that we release.
Yeah, you said it, Sam. It seems like things get better and better, when it comes to accessibility, and we look forward to just what that means 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and what it really looks like. Before I let you go, anything else out there you'd like to articulate to the viewer or the listener just about GAD?
Well, I think it's really important that we celebrate kind of all aspects of Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Everybody can do their part. It doesn't take a development team or a publishing wing or you don't have to be the leader of industry. You can take a look around you and find ways to make everyday life more accessible for those around you. And just thinking about the little things that you take for granted often can manifest into real world significant changes or ways that you can improve things for everybody around you. Everybody has aging adults in their lives, right? They have young children. One of the most profound things for me was just watching my daughter game and learn gaming as she was growing up, and understanding the differences and challenges with small hands and motor skill progression, and being able to kind of help her along the way, and watching her kind of grow and develop was a very profound impact on how I look and approach these types of challenges for the games that we work on. So I think that all of us can take time to just look and start with our families and look at how we interact with them on a daily. Look at our friends and their friends and everybody in our workplace, and we can find ways to make a difference. It doesn't have to take a lot. It doesn't have to take much investment. Little things go a long way.
Well said, Sam. Well, Sam, and we appreciate what you do and the great folks over there at Sony PlayStation. Just amazing, and we look forward to what the future holds. And always great catching up with you, my friend.
Thank you, Paul. We got some great stuff in store. You're gonna be a happy guy, I promise.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it. The great Sam Thompson over at Sony Interactive Worldwide Studios, project manager, senior producer, you name it. Sam is incredible. Some of the great things that they did with Uncharted. Something tells me about a new project coming out. I think if we thought that was good, I just got that feeling that we're definitely going to have our minds blown with this next project.
Hi, this is Josh Straub, editor-in-chief of Daggers, wishing everyone a happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I run the web's premier source for game journalism with a focus on physical accessibility, and we really value days like Global Accessibility Awareness Day because it allows us to spread our message to the broader public, and it allows the other half of what I do, which is consulting. It allows me to get my message out to people who need accessibility consulting, as well as just educate people about the great work being done in the field of accessibility. I myself am very grateful for all the leaps and strides that have been done, specifically in the area of gaming. And, if you had told me 8 years ago when I started this, that if you had told me 8 years ago when I had started this, that major game developers would be investing this much in accessibility, I would have laughed at you. But here we are, and I really am shocked but incredibly hopeful about the future of not only game accessibility, but accessibility in general, and the long-term status of people. If you're interested in learning more about what we do, feel free to visit us at daggersystem.com or if you want to know more about my consulting in the area of physical accessibility, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Josh P. Straub. That's JOSH, P as in Paul, STRAUB. Have a great Global Accessibility Awareness Day, everyone.
Speaking about gaming and accessibility, let's check in with two guys who have furthered the cause when it comes to accessibility and gaming and some of the great things that they're able to accomplish and what GAD 2020 means for them. And I'm so happy to have with me right now these incredible gentlemen. You know them by the looks of them. They are so just important to the gaming world, accessibility in general. And I'm so happy to have them with me. Steve Spahn, Chief Operating Officer over at Able Gamers. What's going on, my friend? How are you?
Hanging out, Paul. I appreciate you dragging me on here today and getting me out of the virtual house for a minute.
Hey, I'm glad I got you out of here, man. So let me do this one more time. Sorry about that. Here we go. I'm looking away like I got crazy eyes. Let's do it again. Here we go. I'm so happy to have with me right now, Chief Operating Officer, Able Gamers, Steve Spahn. What's going on, my man? How are you?
How's it going, Paul? I'm just really glad that you were able to drag me out of the virtual house for a minute.
Hey, glad to have you, man. You know, you've always been a huge person I look up to when it comes to gaming and accessibility. I'm so happy we have a chance to have this chat. Now, not to be undone, because we don't want our other pal to get upset. We got the man himself. Mark Barley, founder and executive director over at Able Gamers. What's going on, brother? How are you?
I'm actually not in a virtual house. I came to the Able Gamers headquarters to make sure that the mail gets picked up. So for me, I'm actually like traversing from my house to Able Gamers, and it's real lonely and quiet in here. And then I go home.
Now, Mark, do you like it like that or what?
I'm getting used to it. I mean, we have some great staff members that work here out of the center, and I'm missing them. But they're more comfortable at home right now. And frankly, I'm cleaning a lot of stuff up while no one's here. Like they're going to come back and they're going to see that a lot of like stuff has been cleaned up, but I've also kind of messed some stuff up as well, and they'll have to fix it.
Yeah, I hear you, Mark. So you're gonna be on their list, Mark, when they come back. But hey, gentlemen, I'm so glad you both decided to join me. And what I wanted to do is talk about Global Accessibility Awareness Day. This is a wonderful day for all of us to celebrate accessibility and what it all means. And Steve, as a part of the disabled community like myself, how important has accessibility been to you and your life?
It ended up being a passion that I started fighting for quite accidentally. I've had the privilege of telling this story a billion times. I actually met Mark when I was just a young, kind of arrogant, disabled 20-year-old who thought they knew everything. And I was looking for answers. I was looking for how you can be a gamer, how you can still continue this life with technology. And I found Able Gamers, and I had been looking for a solution for my own problems.
That's all. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll edit that out. Go ahead, Steve.
Damn ventilator. I've been looking for a solution for my own problems, and I came across an article on Able Gamers talking about World of Warcraft and how you wouldn't be able to play with one hand. And I had actually been doing essentially that by playing with only the mouse and no keyboard. And I was like, haha, Mark Barletta, or whatever your name is, I can do it better than you can. And, he was like, okay, well, if you can, then why don't you do better? And so I ended up writing, figuring out how you can play World of Warcraft with just one hand. And it ended up helping people. It ended up where this thing that I started, where I just wanted to help myself, I ended up helping someone else. And that accessibility to me ended up being what was so important. And I found this passion for bringing accessibility to the forefront through really just joining up with the vision of Mark and his wanting to make the world a better place. I found my own sort of mission, my own voice. Accessibility to me is when you're able to access as much of the world as your spirit allows. And I really think that we all can do that through the power of technology.
I love it, Steve and Mark. We got to have you chime in on when you met Steve and just the interaction and everything. And I've seen you guys in person. You guys are funny together. You guys are like the Abbott and Costello of the gaming world. You guys are so funny the way you guys interact with each other. And just talk about when you first met Steve.
Well, yeah, I mean, Steve kind of told the story all right. So, yeah, I'm sitting here, I just started Able Gamers. It was really just a website. My vision when I first started it wasn't to be the charity that it is today. I was just trying to create this safe space so that players with disabilities could kind of like share ideas. And I had this piece of content, and it was really hard to come by content back then. And we posted it, and I get this cocky email from Steve, like, he's really glazing over it. It was like, you're completely wrong, and I do this, and how dare you say you can't play it? And I kind of said, wow, okay. And I challenged Steve, and I said, well, if you can do it better, hey, I'll be glad to post whatever you write. And cocky little 20-year-old Steve went away. And then a couple days later, I got an email with this really decent article about how he played World of Warcraft. And I published it and was super excited. And it started this like friendship where, going all the way back to like Yahoo chat, Steve and I would be chatting back and forth at the beginning, 10 hours a day, planning and working on trying to make the world a better place. And Able Gamers was only 3 years old when Steve sent his little ranty email, and we're now coming up on 16 years, and looking at some of the stuff that we've done, I'm so proud of it. And it was, Steve was one of those drivers of, he wanted to be, he had a voice, and I gave him the place to use that voice, and boy, has it just paid off for people with disabilities.
That is so true, Mark. And I remember when you and I first met, and just the passion and the drive that you and Steve both have. And Mark, I want to talk about here on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I want to talk about the hidden disability that many of us have that are not seen, and why we should not forget about them or us on that day. And please explain that for us, my friend.
Sure. Well, I'm actually just finding out it's Global Accessibility Awareness Day. In my mind, it's Game Accessibility Awareness Day because of the space that we work in. But yeah, so I actually have two disabilities that are both, considered invisible disabilities. I'm a service disabled veteran. I actually broke my back in the military, and I did a bunch of nerve damage into my left leg during my active duty military service. I also have narcolepsy, which is a sleep disorder that I'm very well treated. So, I'm not going to fall asleep during this, no matter how boring you get it. But the reality is, I've had a need for a handicap parking sticker for many, many years. And, I would have cops come up to me and say, excuse me, you don't look disabled. And, the fact of the matter is, to this one cop that did this, I kind of said, you don't look like you're qualified to do medical diagnosis in a parking lot. To which kind of took him aback, and I had to prove that I had to show him the placard and everything like that. But, there are people out there, don't assume that just because you don't see the trappings of disability, you don't see like wheelchairs and canes and things like that, that you're not working with somebody or you're interacting with somebody that might have a disability and might have a need for an accommodation that, isn't quite obvious. Like, I always tell people, trust if someone says that they need something, just trust that they need it. You don't need to understand why.
I love it. I love it. Well said, Mark. And Steve, when we look at how far we have come in the accessibility movement over the years. I know, like for me, I've been in this game for 27 years. That's when I had my automobile accident, and being in it for decades, my man. Where do you think the most challenging part of being in this movement of helping ones, evangelizing about accessibility? What's been the most challenging part of this?
The hardest part about being an advocate with disabilities for disabilities is just the giant space that we work in. So I've been doing this for nearly 14, 15 years now. Mark's been at it for 16. We've been at this for combined 3 decades, right? And we have managed to bring together this amazing team of individuals, and we've made a dent into disability space in the video game area. But there are so many other areas where technology needs to work in, from airplanes to automobiles to transit to home to housing to policy making, and you can't do it all. So, I've had so many conversations with Mark about the areas we would love to get into if we could ever just solve the one area that we're working on, which is social isolation and using video games as a tool to combat that. But we're never going to be able to solve everything. And that's one of the
Yeah, to what Steve said, we've had so many conversations about, wow, wouldn't it be great if we took some of the stuff we learned at Able Gamers and apply it to this area or that area? I mean, deep down, Steve and I want to fix the world for all people with disabilities. We can only focus on one. I've actually spent a lot of time and effort trying to encourage champions to find their own thing to solve. There is nothing special about what Steve and I are doing right now. I didn't go to nonprofit school. I didn't go to advocacy school. I was just a guy with a vision and a passion, and Steve wanted to play better. And I'm trying to tell people, and I'm talking to young people now that I've become, older, and people are asking me for advice, which is like, nothing that we're doing is proprietary. And if you see something that you want to solve, go solve it, because, we saw something that we wanted to solve, and I will say largely we've solved it. So, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of passion. But there's no magic to it other than putting in the work and to solve that problem.
It's just like any other channel. You have to find your voice and you have to find your passion. So my passion happened to be helping people, and I happen to be somebody who liked video games. And Mark happened to be using video games as a way to keep his family connected, and then found out that disability was something that needed advocated for. We never intended to do this. We intended to just start a little blog, then maybe do a little more. Okay, well, also we need help over here. Oh, crap, we also need to go over this way and help this. And then we ended up making an international charity. And people kind of laugh at us when we say, like, oh, haha, you accidentally made an international charity. Yeah, we did. We accidentally made an international. Yeah, it was. It was just trying to help the world as best we could. But, we're just two guys trying to do what we can. We have an amazing team that works with us every day who are, by and large, smarter than we are. We just surround yourself with smart people. That's how you make yourself look good. But to answer the original question of how you do this, you pick your lane and you figure out how you push your part of the boulder up the hill. We can't do it all. And I think a great example of that is some of you in the disability community will no doubt know the name Shane Burkaw, who's a great friend of mine, has SMA, just like I do. And he's chosen to use his life to show what it's like to live with a disability. He shows how you get in a shower with technology, how you have a caretaker do all that. And it's very intro personal. It's very, he shows everything. And he's comfortable with that, and I'm not. That's not my voice. I'm not somebody who wants to show like how a caretaker brushes my hair or my teeth. I want to show how you can use a game to stay connected with your friend. And for me, that was my voice. Mark's voice was helping people, and together we just made this amplification of this is how you use technology to stay connected to one another.
Any thoughts you'd like to share with our viewers and listeners out there?
Yeah, first of all, I have to say thanks for inviting us on here. Friendships are what make the world go round. I would be an entirely different person if it wasn't for meeting advocates like you. Honestly, meeting Mark changed my life in a way that I'll never be able to describe because it made me who I am today. It's not a matter of whether or not you want to help the world. We all want to do our part, right? It's a matter of finding out where does your piece fit into the puzzle. And I strongly advise all of you out there to look inside yourselves. Find out what it is that inspires you. What gives you that tingle in the spine? What makes your hair stand on end in your arm whenever you talk about it and you're like, I have to tell the world how great and wonderful this is. And for us, it was video games and it was helping people stay connected. For you, it could be a number of other things. But figure out what it is that you want to do to help the world. And that's how you're going to use accessibility. When you have a mind that's willing and a body that's unable, video games can be a window into an otherwise inaccessible world. And I think at the end of the day, together, you and my friend here, Paul, my friend here, Mark, we all can do it. Just come on board with us and join the bandwagon of accessibility.
Hey, take care.
Huge shout out to my man, Steve Spahn and Mark Burley, Able Gamers. Great guys and great allies in this cause. Love y'all to death, man. Mad props. Glad to have you in this fight with us. Really, really appreciate it. Well, let's check in with our great friend, Bryce Johnson of Microsoft, and see what he's been up to lately and what does GAD mean to him personally. I'm excited to have this next guest with me. You're looking at it right now. You know who I'm talking about. My man, Bryce Johnson. He is the inclusive lead at Microsoft Devices. Bryce, happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day. How you doing, my friend?
I am great. Thank you so much for inviting me to chat. I love talking with you.
Hey, great to see you again, my friend, even though we weren't able to hang out at other functions and other things this year because of what's going on. But I'm glad we can do it virtually, man, and just catch up and see everybody's smiley face. That's what I like about teleconferencing and video in, just to see people's faces out there smiling, man. And Bryce, you got one of the electric smiles out there, my friend. Just want to let you know that. Hey,
thank you.
So let's talk about Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And Bryce, this day is so important to myself, and I know to you as well. So when you think of global accessibility awareness, what does that mean to you?
You know, it's funny. It's really interesting that you mentioned it because obviously it's an important day for us as a community and how we think about the work that we do. But I got to tell you, to be honest, it kind of sneaks up on me every year. I feel like Global Accessibility Awareness Day to me is like how an elf must feel like on Christmas Day. It's kind of like, oh, okay, it's here. What do I do now? Because we're always working so hard all the time to promote accessibility in the work that we do and to try to communicate what the community kind of needs and to sort of evangelize our inclusive design methodology. That when you have like a special day like Global Accessibility Awareness Day to celebrate it, you're a little caught off guard. It's interesting.
No, I feel you, bro. I was the same way because when I was trying to put this program together, I was like, oh, shoot, I got to put this together real quick, and reached out to you and some of our other friends, and you guys came on board to do it. So I really appreciate it. So that means, Bryce, we need to advocate for a Global Accessibility Awareness Month. That's what we need. We need to celebrate this for 30 days. We don't want no 28 days like February. We want a full 31 days right there. But that's for another show right there. We're going to talk about that later. But Bryce, looking at how instrumental you have been when it comes to accessibility, when did you know that this was something you really wanted to be a part of to help out our community?
I've always cared about accessibility. It always just seemed to make sense for me. People always ask like how I got into it. Like I needed to have some kind of like Spider-Man-esque origin story that made it really personal. But I don't. Like it always just made sense. Like why, of course, like if I'm going to make something, why wouldn't I want the widest range of diverse people to be able to use it? So accessibility always kind of just made sense to me. I think one of the big sort of shifts for me in 2002, I got to design the digital library for the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. And that was a kind of a seismic shift in how I thought about it, because for once my customers weren't typical people. where I'm trying to include people with disabilities, my customers were like the blind and low vision. And so it really made me very aware of how, design can really either empower or disempower people with disabilities. From then, I had a job in tech. I always cared about accessibility. And I think what really happened was when Satya came on board, as CEO at Microsoft. I mean, he was always sort of there, but when he became CEO, I remember at our Ability Summit, which actually is a yearly thing we do at Microsoft. It's actually coming up on the 27th and 28th of May this year. I remember Satya giving like a talk. He was fresh as CEO, and I asked him, I go, "Hey Satya, how can you make designers care about design?" And he looked at me and he said something, which he said to a lot of people since then, which is kind of his philosophy. He kind of went, "No, you do it." And what he was trying to say is like, I can't make people do anything. And I mean, that's not entirely true, but what he was trying to say is that it's important for all of us to kind of like build from the ground up. When we think about accessibility, a lot of the times at the work we do at Microsoft, there is a lot of top-down sort of influence that does sort of empower us. But the real work happens by like this kind of groundswell of people across Microsoft just kind of doing their thing.
And that's one thing, Bryce, when I look back kind of at my journey, 27 years for me being a part of the person with disability community. And when I got out the hospital, there was not a lot of accessibility. To me, the accessibility was maybe the power wheelchair. At that time, they started to have it recline, but my first one didn't recline. And then I kind of remember the curb cutouts. To me, that was accessibility. But over the years, seeing ones like yourself and others who are championing this cause right here, it really just warms my heart to see how far we've come since I've been a part of this community. And Bryce, talk about just when you're able to meet the need or help others who are part of this community to do something, whether it's playing a game, whether it's accessing a feature in a device. How does it make you feel when you get that feedback and they're like, "Mr. Johnson or Bryce, I love this. This helped me to do my homework. This helped me to be a productive member of my team." How does it make you feel, Bryce, when you hear feedback like that?
I mean, it's always great to get great feedback, and we definitely and I definitely have appreciated the overwhelming response that we've received for the Xbox Adaptive Controller. I will say that I'm a very typical Microsoft person in the sense that we love good feedback, but we also really love we love the problems, right? So whenever someone tells me that they really love something, it's kind of my first instinct to kind of go, but how can we make it better? Like, how can we do something that's even better? And to kind of dig into it a bit more, I think one of the things that we've been thinking about a lot lately, as COVID-19 has basically shifted the way that many of us, or very many of us, work, in that we've moved from an office to a remote situation. You certainly see the disability community understandably saying, "Listen, we told you remote work was doable all along, and now you're all doing it." So that's true, and it's great to find that out. But now I'm trying to figure out what are the hassles that people with disabilities have when they're actually working remotely, and unintentional hassles. There's so many times where people basically tell me, "Oh yeah, it's super easy. All I got to do is this and this and this and this, and then it works." And I go, "But for everyone else, they just have to do one thing, and you're doing four. So that doesn't sound super easy to me. That sounds really kind of complicated." So I think we're always just striving to figure out how we can make things easier for people with disabilities, even if they think it's easy already.
And Bryce, I'm glad you said that, because I remember a few years back with the Xbox Accessible controller, where I reached out to you about a couple of facilities here in California who wanted to get them, and you provided that for me. We really appreciate that. And I remember you when you sent the email out, you said, "Look, tell me the challenges with it. Tell me this, tell me that." Because I think what happens sometimes, Bryce, as the member of the community, we're just so happy that people are listening to us. We're kind of like that shy kid in school, and then the finest girl in school was like, "Hey, here's my number, call me." And you're just like so happy that she called you, that you have the, just her looking at you. And I think sometimes we get starstruck. But I'm glad
Yeah.
that you said that. You're like, "Hey, let us know what's going on so we can make it even better." And I really appreciate the way you guys feel about that, Bryce.
Well, and I think, a lot of us have been making products a long time. We always know that it is a journey. And I think that's one of the great things about how we approach accessibility at Microsoft. It's not a one and done. We're not going to solve it. It's always going to be something that we need to think about and be sort of diligent about. And that's something I think that's really kind of starting to sink in. And I think the way that you make people feel good about that is that you figure out the innovations that can come from working with people with disabilities, and making sure that those things are kind of present for people, so that they can be aware of them. And people who don't typically think about people with disabilities.
That's true. Because I know even like our conversations that we have had in events that you and I have been on together, how when we kind of put the conversation out to the forefront with the gaming community, with Sam Thompson and some of the other great folks out there who are advocates. And it was interesting, the feedback we got. Some of them like, "Oh, I didn't know that. I never knew that." So by us, championing this message, we're able to bring others on board. And think about, Bryce, how many people on board now with this accessibility movement. It like blows my mind, like how many people on projects now who are working on these things, man. And what does that show you and tell you just about the hard work that you've been involved in and others when it comes to this?
Momentum is amazing. And if anything, we always just kind of want to keep it going. But I am still kind of constantly in this place of like, we got to do better. But at the same time, you do have to celebrate like when you have kind of done some decent work. So I think we're at a place right now, and I'm sure you can relate to this, where people are positive about the idea of accessibility, but might not have the insight to know how to get started, right? I still work with a lot of people who just don't know a lot of others with disabilities. So the unknown aspect of working with people with disabilities can be a little bit of a barrier to get started in itself. Like, product people often design products for themselves. We do it naturally. It's completely natural. Everyone does that, and what we've learned in our practice is that, we believe in nothing about us without us. And it's constantly that we have to work at nothing about us without us. Like, I don't ever want to be at a place where I can speak for the community. That's not a goal of mine,
No, but we appreciate when you do, man, because, when there's more with us than against us, we can definitely move mountains in what we do. And that reminds me, Bryce, when we were at E3 a few years back, when we had that panel at E3 Coliseum, and I remember right after we did that panel, we were at lunch, and Bryce, your wheels were still going because you were very concerned with those who are hearing impaired to get the closed caption. So right away you went over to the organizer at ESA and you said, "Look, we need to get some captions on there for our community out there who are not able to hear." And Bryce, they got on it right away. And that's just a testament, Bryce, of how you are always thinking of others. And I think that's a great quality to have, because in this business, I know, like with consulting, sometimes as consultants, we look at, okay, this works for me, instead of what about the person who is worse off than me? What about the person who only has one hand, no finger movement? What if a full quad has just a neck movement? Can this work for him? And I think sometimes as consultants, we can be myopic and say, "Oh yeah, this works. It's accessible," but is it accessible for the masses? And we can learn a lot from you, Bryce, to keep on looking and keep on moving forward, man. That's great quality you have.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I will tell you, how that desire to push for captions kind of came. It's important to work with a diverse set of people. And Jenny Leigh Fleury, who's our chief accessibility officer, she's deaf. So when I do work, if I make videos at work, if I don't caption them, she can't see them. So like she's an executive on our team. I need to make sure that my stuff is accessible for her because she's in a sense one of my bosses. So yeah, it just becomes natural to kind of sit there and go, yeah, we need captions on this. We need to talk about descriptive video or descriptive audio for video and things like that. It all just we surround ourselves with a diverse set of people, and their needs basically help shape what we build.
And Bryce, when we look at global accessibility awareness and just the job that you do and the rest of your team, is there anything else out there you'd like for the viewer or the listener to really walk away with from our discussion, to just highlight just what's all involved, your mission, and just your thoughts on it that you have?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I'm really excited about now that we have some momentum as a community of inclusive designers is that we can get beyond basically the table stakes, right? Not that table stakes aren't important, and not that we can't always make them kind of better, but I always love this sort of idea of finding innovation by working with the disability community. I mean, and that's what brings me to work kind of every day. I'm not trying to build like the greatest accommodations. I'm trying to design inclusive and innovative new things that not only help people with disabilities, but like benefit everyone. That's the ultimate goal, right? Yeah. So that's what kind of gets me out of bed and gets me motivated every day. And to see this momentum that we have with Global Accessibility Awareness Day and the awareness in general is really very, it's very helpful. It's very empowering.
And that's one thing, Bryce, that I noticed, that when it becomes an accessible design for us, it's amazing how ones without disabilities start to love on it, start to use it, and I know like my family members, they love voice access now. I'm like, no, you can get up and turn it off yourself. Don't tell them to do it. You do it yourself. This is mine. But they see how easy it makes their life as well too. And Bryce, what are some projects that you're working on now? I know you probably can't discuss all of them, but can you let us know what your creative mind is working on now?
I can tell you what my focus is at work. So while I've kind of, people know me for the adaptive controller, and I still try to kind of poke my head around in that. The majority of my work is now in Surface, in Microsoft Surface. So we're trying to make sure that we can make productivity accessible for people. I mean, I think, as you know, and as a lot of people know, people with disabilities are sort of have a multitude higher rate of unemployment than people without disabilities. And so we really want to make sure that people with disabilities are active participants in society. And to do that, we want to make work more accessible. So thinking about productivity is something that's kind of really big on my mind right now. And, I mentioned the remote work stuff earlier. But yeah, I went from game controllers to keyboards. Hopefully I'll be back to game controllers, keyboards, and other things.
Awesome. Bryce, did you break something live on here, man? Did you do that? Are you giving us a little hint? No, I'm just joking with you.
One of the things that we've launched, it's out there in the world. It's really small, but we did some really intentional rearranging of our Surface keyboards for our blind users. We added little tactile affordances on the F4 and F8 keys, kind of like the little bumps that you get on the F and J keys on a keyboard. And the reason why we did that was because laptop keyboards are a lot more compressed than desktop keyboards. And desktop keyboard conventions sort of give you a little bit more affordance of where you are on the keyboard, like your hands know where they are based on the shape and position of a button. So we wanted to add some of those back. So we added some tiny little bumps to F4 and F8. Another thing that we did was there's a key on a lot of laptop keyboards called function or function lock, which, believe it or not, was never in the specification for keyboards, ours, Google's, Apple's, that key, the computer needed to know the state of that key. So what that meant was that a screen reader never knew whether that key was on or off. And so we had to commission the standard body to let us basically say, listen, we want the OS to know the state of this keyboard. And they're like, why? And we're like, well, because for blind users, they don't know the state of this key. right? So that's a little sneak peek into like the kind of stuff that we've done, but that's all public. Those launched last fall with our Surface Pro X and our Surface Laptop 3, and now all of our keyboards have those enhancements.
Nice. And Bryce, I know over at Microsoft, you guys are like a little country over there with how many employees and who are part of the team. But if you can let the teams know over there who handles Office and everything, the dictate button in Word, I love it, man. It makes it so
That's
much
cool.
easier when I'm dictating things, when I'm writing copy.
You know it's in iOS now, right?
What?
Yeah, so in Word and iOS, the dictate button's there now too, so you can do it on the go. Yeah.
That's why in my iOS it said update app. I haven't did it yet. That's why it's telling me to do that, right?
Yeah, you should do it.
Go.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. We're really happy with dictate. We need to make that better. But yeah, all those modalities all the time, right? Like that's what we want. We want all the input and all the output all the time.
I love it, my friend. And Bryce, you guys continue to fight the fine fight, and we really appreciate it. What can we do as the disabled community do to help you guys out in this crusade? What do you need us to do? How can we help and be partners?
Yeah, I think the best way to think about it, and I think you'll get this too, we need feedback. We always kind of need feedback, and we do need partners, like kind of beyond some really kind of basic feedback, like having articulate and detailed feedback really helps us a lot. I think one of the interesting things for me, since I work across different aspects of the disability community, is to kind of understand as a community, our edges. Like to give you an example, you have spinal cord injury, right?
Yes.
So when I go work with someone who, like say at Harborview Medical in Seattle, and like, because this happens a lot, where I'll try to show them the adaptive controller, and they're in the hospital still because their spinal cord injury is fresh, right? So they remember using a regular controller a month ago. And then I'm trying to work with them like for how their reality is now. And completely understandably, like sometimes they're not ready to do that. They're not ready to let go of what they had, right? But if I work with a kid with cerebral palsy who was born that way and never had it, it's a kind of a different story. And so that's a really interesting aspect of like of that work for me now. It's understanding like what part of your life you're in with your disability and how you think about it. I don't think I think a lot of times people think of the disability community this monolithic thing, and it's like, no, everyone's on this like different part of their own personal journey through it, right? And it's important to understand where people are at. So that type of insight is actually really important for us.
And Bryce, I love that point, because that takes me back to when I was in hospital. I was in hospital for about 8 months, and I remember my first OTs and PTs came in, and they're like, "We're going to fit you for your chair, these wrist ribbons and these arm elevations." I'm like, I don't need that. I'm not going to be like this forever. And I think it's kind of like that denial. And you know what helped me, Bryce, was when a light flickered on, and I was like, even if I get better, let me learn these things now, because it's going to help me right now. So I think if many of us who have been in their shoes, let them know, hey, just learn it now. If you get better, that's what we want. But if it stays the same, learn this now, because it's going to be very, very invaluable. But I tell you, the human psyche and the human emotion sometimes is so strong that I can remember. I said, take that wheelchair back. I'm not going to need it. 27 years later, I still got my chair, and I got a sharp one too, Bryce. I don't have a cheap one.
I love that we can have wheelchair jokes.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, my friend, well, always great catching up with you. How can we find out more information about the great things that you guys are doing over at Microsoft in the accessibility department? How can they do so, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, you can. A lot of what we do goes out on Twitter through the Microsoft Enable account. You can look that up on Twitter. That's always kind of constant. We also post on LinkedIn all the time, and I'm sure we post on Facebook and all those places too. look for what we're doing on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And if you want to, I think, I don't, it'll be interesting when this comes out on GAD, but we might have some registrations still open for the Ability Summit, which is our internal conference that we do every year. But this year, we're opening it up to the public too, because we're all kind of at home. So we're going to open it up. So that's going to be really cool.
That's fantastic, because I'm going to be there. I'll be there with my friends from United Spinal Association. They reached out to me a few weeks ago. I said, hey, register for this. And I'm like, Bryce and the team, I'm there.
That's cool. I didn't know you were doing it. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I got to look at the schedule.
Yeah. Well,
again, I don't look at the schedule.
Well, I'm not going to speak it. I'm not that big time with United Spinal, but I'm going to be there and, just
nice.
Just be there.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And I mean, we have to work with that. We have to work with that community. I got to get down to Rancho one day, man.
Yeah. Well, come on down, man. And when we come down, I'm going to take you to this one spot in Culver City. Sam Thompson knows about this spot. It's called Tito's Tacos, and it's the best tacos. I used to go there. I used to go there, Bryce, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and tacos were like 35 cents and 45 cents with cheese. Now you got to pawn your car to get a taco, but it's so good. But we're going to do it when you come out to Cali. All right, my friend?
You bet. That sounds amazing.
Always great catching up with you, my man. Keep up doing a fine job.
Yeah, it was cool talking to you too, man.
Same here, my friend. Brooke McCall and Ian Reuter. Great having them. And United Spinal Association are doing some great things with their tag group that I'm a member of. I'm a thought leader. So great to be a part of that, especially furthering the inclusion cause out there. We couldn't have an accessibility show without this person right here. I'm talking about the great Sir Ian Hamilton. And I'm so happy to have him right now on this Global Accessibility Awareness Day. My friend and yours, Sir Ian Hamilton. Ian, I officially knighted you, man. What's happening?
Yeah, it's going well.
Great to see you, my friend. You and your family doing well during this lockdown and sheltering in place? You guys all well and healthy?
Yeah, all good. The weather's been nice here. We've got a garden to sit in, so can't complain.
That's cool, my friend. Hey, but another year, Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Ian, it reminds me of last year when you put out the list of all the GAD events that were happening, and I was looking through it, and I said, Ian put mine in there. Ian is so cool. He remembered me. So I appreciate you for that, for last year and everything, and Ian, all that you do for the community. And I wanted to have you on just special GAD that we have this year, especially because we're not able to go and do little talks that we normally would do during this time.
Yep.
We got to do it virtually now. So let's talk about what accessibility has mean to you and why is it so important for us to have this GAD and appreciate GAD Day.
Well, it's just a nice thing to hang it off. There's people in companies all over the place who always have ideas for kind of stuff they want to do to try and persuade people, or maybe people who haven't, who just need that little extra bit of a push, to just go out and do something. It doesn't have to be a lot, even just people putting out a tweet, or finally having that conversation with that colleague about that thing they always wanted to, or people making announcements about stuff they're working on. So it's been really, really powerful, not just in terms of the direct awareness that it raises, but also the amount of people in the games industry who've been getting behind it. The real sense of like a community movement that comes from the day as well is really nice.
That is so true. And when we look at the movement that we have now with the accessibility movement, Ian, I mean, you were doing this before I even jumped on. And when we look at where this started to where it's today, what are some of the memories that you have in the early inception of pushing this topic until now?
I think a big one for me was back when Assassin's Creed 3 was not quite out yet. And I remember there was a post on the Assassin's Creed 3 forums from disabled gamer asking if they could have button remapping in Assassin's Creed 3 because they wouldn't be able to play it otherwise. And up to that point, anytime there was some kind of discussion about an accessibility issue, there was like an outpouring of vitriol around accessibility. Even the stuff now, which is kind of taken for granted, like colorblind support, for example, there would just be posts and posts of like, how dare you try and interfere with the designer's creative vision for how they want the visuals to look and all that kind of stuff. It was just standard that when people post that kind of stuff, it was. I mean, it wasn't 100% bad reception, but there was a lot of real misconceptions about what accessibility was. Lots of fear of the unknown and all that kind of stuff. And I remember that was a real turning point for me because that was the first time that I actually noticed that most of the replies were actually positive. In fact, I think all of the replies in that thread, it was something like 10 pages of just like solid backing for this person's request. He didn't actually get his button remapping. The button remapping didn't arrive until I think was it Assassin's Creed Origins, which is quite a few years later. But at the time, there was one post in particular that really stuck with me, which was someone replying saying, I'd never thought about this issue before, but now that I'm aware, I don't think that I would feel comfortable playing it myself, knowing that there's people who are being unnecessarily excluded from the same enjoyment that I'm having. And that really, really blew my mind, that thread. I mean, that post in particular, but just the general outpouring of support. And of course, that kind of thing is common now. But that really felt like a big turning point for me. And I think that's a really, really critical part of the accessibility stuff. It's not just the efforts that developers are making, but the shift that there's been in the gaming community. I mean, it's not completely there yet. There's still a way to go, but just the shift that people have got in their understanding what accessibility is, and thinking accessibility is a good thing. And I think on a similar note, another big turning point for that was the Xbox Adaptive Controller, when they had their holiday advert and the Super Bowl advert in particular. Just reams and reams and reams of pages of comments of like on YouTube. You know what YouTube comment sections are like? It's a wretched harvest of villainy. But like every single comment that was on the video for this advert was just all positive. So that I think for me has been a really important turning point. Is just how the wider community has been getting behind accessibility. And I would hope that have implications on accessibility in other industries as well. People are more receptive to this kind of stuff.
And you bring up a very good point, Ian. The rabbit hole of commenting on Twitter and YouTube. And before I had you on, I had Mark Burley and also Steve Spahn on, and I kind of posed that question to Steve about how you have ones who don't realize how important accessibility features are, and they try to discourage it, saying you're messing up the gaming experience and all these other things. They don't have to use it. It's a feature that can turn off and on. So it just baffles me. And Ian, when we look at today, where more people are more understanding than I'm sorry, did I say Dave? I called you David, didn't I, Ian? Ian, did I call you David back? Okay, I'll
go way back.
Yeah, I'll edit this out. So let me go back to this. Here we go. So, Ian, when we look at just how far we have come, and just the barriers we still have to overcome or even go through, it still baffles me to this day the criticism that we get when we are talking about accessibility in gaming. Even though it's gotten a lot better, I had Mark Burley and Steve Spahn on from Able Gamers before I had you on, and we kind of talked about that. And the interesting thing about it is, over time, we've seen that either those gamers have family members who are disabled, God forbid something happened to them, they became disabled, and now they see just the benefits of this. What can we do, Ian, to really try to educate ones out there in a way that we don't get into an argument with them, we don't get into a shouting match? We try to listen to each other and try to understand where both sides are coming from. What can help us to do that?
It's tough because social media doesn't really lend itself to that kind of stuff. Often when those kind of conversations start, it's people who have been kind of sitting in an echo chamber, getting more and more riled up, more and more riled up, even if the reason why they're riled up is like a misunderstanding or misconception. By the time somebody else comes in and starts having that conversation, then it is already in a really strongly adversarial position. So it's tough. I don't think there really is any easy answer to how you can just go in and have like a calm, rational conversation. I find a lot of the time when I'm speaking to these kind of people about stuff, it takes a while to just like gradually wind down the kind of like level of rhetoric and stuff until eventually it gets to the point when somebody's been speaking to you for long enough that they kind of actually realize that you are like a person that they're having a normal conversation with, instead of like faceless, nameless social media enemy number one who must be defended against, you know. But once things do start to quiet down a bit, I find it's usually the case that people just haven't thought about it enough, you know. And like your opinions can only be as good as the information you've got to base your opinions on. So once actually things are calmed down, you can have a rational conversation with someone. You generally find doesn't take a lot. I mean, just pointing out something as simple as like if that person over there turns on an option that you don't turn on, how does that affect your experience? And most of the time when people think about that kind of stuff, they're like, yeah, I guess, yeah, fair enough, you know. There are like a small number of people who are genuinely, passionately in favour of depriving other people of their experiences because they gain their own satisfaction from being able to do something other people can't do, things like that. But that number of people is actually quite small. So I do really believe that most people can be turned around if they actually spend the time thinking about it. But like I was saying, social media doesn't really lend itself to calm, considered conversations, and it is tough, you know, that kind of stuff. It takes a toll, like trying to go through those kind of conversations and go through that wind down and stuff. But it's got to be done.
So true, so true. It kind of reminds me, Ian, of what we go through when we see prejudices out there, whether if it's a race, a religion, or a gender. It seems like people are afraid of the unknown. And it's also some kind of selfish thing that they're dealing with in their person. And the reason why I say that is when someone feels that someone is getting an advantage and that they're being left out, they're kind of selfish about it. Wait a minute, where's mine? Where's mine? What about what I need? But it's not absolute. It's relative. Things are relative. For instance, a blind gamer, a gamer who's deaf, they have different needs than someone who's not deaf, who's not blind. So if we understand where a person is coming from, I think we'll be able to take down these barriers that exist from the hate that we receive from others who don't realize how important these things are, Ian, and what we're fighting for.
Yeah. And people are passionate as well, you know. That's why people get so angry about this stuff, is because they care about the medium, they care about the experiences they personally have. So it would be nice if some of that passion and energy could be put to a different direction, you know.
So true, so true. And so, Ian, when we look at some of the strides that we have made, one thing that really makes me optimistic about where we're going is kind of the manipulation. I don't want to say manipulation, but some of the strides we're making when it comes to software accessibility. And to me, that's just where technology is taking us, using all these AIs and all these different coding to make it so, for instance, a person doesn't have to maybe remap a controller, or maybe doesn't have to do all these things, but just go to one setting in the game and boom, it's there. Or we become the interface as a human. And when we look at something like that, Ian, where do you think we can make the biggest impact when it comes to software design and the integration that provides?
Well, I kind of look at it from a kind of a different angle, which is more about, rather than looking at the barrier and then finding something, some kind of technological overlay over the top of that to instead look at why that barrier is even there in the first place. Does that exclusionary design decision have to be made that way? And a lot of the time it doesn't. It can be addressed without actually technology, just through recognizing that actually the people you're designing your games for are varied. So don't design it for one particular silo that matches up with your own personal experiences. So that's more the kind of stuff that I like to focus on, that kind of design level stuff where, with just a bit of thought and recognition of the whole spectrum of human variants, that you can actually come up with just a better, more usable, more enjoyable solution for all of your players.
I love it. I love it. I love it, Ian. And being in this fight for a very long time, Ian, we look at just this community that we are part of. One thing that strikes me, man, is just the camaraderie that we all have with each other. I mean, it's like none of us are trying to outshine each other. We're always trying to help each other, see which ways we can make this movement better. And to me, that's real refreshing because in a competitive world that we live in, we seem to all get along with each other pretty well. I mean, Ian, I can call you or text you and say, hey, Ian, what about this? What about that? And you're like, hey, let's do it. We can hit up our friend David Terson, right? Did I say it right?
That's about it.
All right, we can hit up David over at Ubisoft, Sam over at Naughty Dog PlayStation, Sony PlayStation, Bryce, Cherry. We can have all these different conversations and for the betterment and talk about just the camaraderie that we have in this industry that just really shows, man, just how much we love this and how much passion we are about it.
Yeah, it's important. It's needed. I mean, especially like you're saying about some of those like cold-face social media battles that play out over, not to name names of games, but when that kind of stuff goes on, like I said, it really takes its toll. So actually having a good support network around you is really important. And often what you find as well, certainly in other industries, and it's kind of starting to get that in the games industry now, where there are companies that do actually have like full-time permanent accessibility staff in a house, but it's generally like one person within the company or like two people in the company, that kind of thing, or somebody who doesn't have it as an official role, who's just like the one person on their team who desperately wants to fix this stuff and is trying to persuade their teammates, and then all the various independent people as well who are literally like on their own. So that again is where that kind of like community and support network and just moral support in general is really important. And that's one of the goals with GeoConf, the conference, is actually having that venue where people can actually get together and have that feeling that actually you're not alone, being this like one person against, like on the hilltop of the machine gun against the rampaging hordes. You know what I mean? That there are actually a whole bunch of other people out there who are going through exactly the same stuff as you, who understand the struggles you're going through and can just